Solving quadratic equations by factoring. When you are solving quadratic functions, you are finding the value of the variable that will make it true. Example 1. Find the roots of the following equations. Remember, roots were the x values, so we're looking for the value of the variable that will make the equation true. First thing we need to do is have everything on one side, so that equation is equal to 0. If we look at our equation, we will find that it is currently equal to 0. So we are good for that piece. The next thing we need to do now is to factor. We're looking at two numbers that will multiply to give me positive 6 and add to give me negative 5. In order to be a positive 6 when we multiply, they either have to be both positive or both negative. Factors of 6 are 1 and 6, 2 and 3. We have figured out that they either have to both be positive or both be negative. To get a negative answer when we add, tells us they both have to be negative. So if we look at the two sets of factors, the one that will add to give us negative 5 is the negative 2 and negative 3. So we make our two sets of brackets. We put x at the front of each of them. We put our negative 2 and our negative 3 after them. At this stage now, if this was 0, 0 times a number will equal 0. If this is 0, a number times 0 will give us 0. So we're looking to see what's going to make each of the sets of brackets equal to 0. So we're going to go x minus 2 equals 0 and x minus 3 equal to 0. And we're going to take those two equations and we're going to solve them to find our x. So for the first one, currently we're subtracting 2. So add 2 to both sides. We get x is equal to 2. So there's one of them. With our other one, we're subtracting 3. So adding 3 to both sides, we get x is equal to 3. Before we can factor this one, we need to move everybody to the same side. Here our x squared is positive, so we're going to move our 9x to the other side. This is a positive 9x, so we're going to subtract 9x from both sides. And now part of the reason we're doing this is because it's easier to factor when the x squared is positive than when the x squared is negative. Looking at these two x's are not the same. This one has an exponent of 2, this one does not. So these guys cannot be combined. As a result, we have 4x squared minus 9x equals 9 minus 9 is 0. Our next step when we go to factor is looking for common factors. Common factors could be a number, it could be a letter, or it could be both. Looking at this, both of these terms have an x. So we can take an x out as a common factor. When we divide this by x, we still have the 4. 2 x's take out 1, leaves us with 1x. Divide this, sign doesn't change. 9 we still have, had 1x, took out 1x, we have no x's left. Now, at this stage, because we've got some brackets, we've got some multiplying, we would normally make what was inside our brackets equal to 0. However, visually looking at it, it looks like we only have one set of brackets. Remember, brackets are telling us when we have two sets that they are being multiplied. Well, this is x times a bracket here, so this would be as if this had a set of brackets around it. So when we go to make things equal to 0, we're going to take this guy, make it equal to 0, take this, and make it equal to 0. That first one is x all by itself, nothing we need to do to it. There is our x value. On the other one, we're going to have to start moving things. Remember, we move furthest to closest. And as we go to do that, this 9 is further away than the 4 is. So we're going to move it first. It was subtracting, so we are going to add to both sides. That gets us 4x. Negative 9 plus 9 is 0. 0 plus 9 is 9. We call a number and a letter with no sign between them is multiplying. Opposite of multiplying is to divide. So we're going to divide both sides by 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. And we have our x. 9 divided by 4, that's going to get us a decimal, so we'll leave it as our fraction. That's 9 over 4. Neither of these two have a number that will divide into both of them other than 1, so we can't reduce our fraction. We could write it like that, or we could write it as x equals 9 over 4 without the 1 in front. This is 100% correct. However, in your answer key for your textbook or a multiple choice question, this is how you may find it. And there's our other x value. Summary steps for solving quadratics using factoring. We're going to move everything to one side so that it equals to 0. The only exception being when there is only one variable, and then we'll solve for the variable. Step 2, factor the side not equal to 0. Step 3, write each factor equal to 0. Remember, a factor is what is in the brackets. And step 4, solve the equations from step 3 for the variables. There is an arched doorway that can be modeled by the function negative 0.625 x squared plus 5x. We would like to get a 7.5 foot crate through the door. The crate must stay upright or the contents will break, which means we cannot tip it over sideways to slide it through this doorway. What is the maximum width of the crate that will fit in the doorway? So, if we look at our scenario, here's our arched doorway, and we have a crate that as it stands goes straight up, across, and comes down, and just touches the corners of the doorway as they go through. Now, things that we do know, we know that this is 7.5 as far as the height goes. And we want to know how wide it is. So how wide it is between those two. If we can figure out what this value is and what this value is, we could subtract them, but we need to know what those are. Easiest way for us to tackle this would be for us to use that ground as our x-axis and draw our y-axis right out of the corner there. And when we do that, that gives us this point here, which is something, comma, 7.5. And this point here, which is something, comma, 7.5. So what we're going to need to do is figure out what the x values are, where y is equal to 7.5. We have two pieces of information. We have our equation, so we know that y is equal to negative 0.625 x squared plus 5x. We also know that the height of our crate was equal to 7.5. We want to know where the two will touch, so that would be where these two equations intersect. Well, if that's going to happen, that means the y value is the same for both. So we can go 7.5 equals negative 0.625 x squared plus 5x. Now, as we go to look at it, we want to have everything on one side equaling to 0, otherwise we can't factor it. So the decision is do we move this or do we move these guys? This is a negative x squared. Everything we have factored has been positive, so we're going to move these guys that way. Recall we do that by doing the opposite. So this was a negative. We're going to add 0.625 x squared to both sides. which gets us 0.625 x squared plus 7.5 equaling 5x. And we still need to move that 5x. That is a positive 5x. So subtracting 5x from both sides. We're getting 0.625 x squared minus 5x plus 7.5 equals 0. Now as we go to look at factoring it, this doesn't have a 1 in front, so we could see if we could do a common factor. So the real question is if I divide these guys by 0.625, do I get a whole number, which I can factor, or will I end up with decimals, which I won't be able to? Turns out if you divide, you will get a whole number, so we can take out a common factor of 0.625, and when we do that, we're left with x squared minus 8x plus 12 in our brackets equaling 0. So recall, to get this I did 5 divided by this, and 12 I did 7.5 divided by 0.625. So at this stage now we're looking for two numbers that multiply to give me positive 12, add to give me negative 8. Numbers that multiply to give me 12 are 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. In order to get a positive when we multiply, they both have to be either negative or both positive. Since this is a negative, they have to all be negative. And when we look at which of these combinations will add to give us negative 8, there's our combo. So we're looking at 0.625 times x minus 2 times x minus 6 equaling 0. We now have it factored, and to solve for x, we're going to take each factor, make it equal to 0, and solve for x. So for the first one, that is a negative, so add 2 to both sides. I get x is equal to 2. This one is negative, so add 6 to both sides. And when I do that, I get x is equal to 6. So, if we go back to our diagram, what we've just figured out is that this x value here is 2, which means this value right here is 2, and that this x value here was 6. So this spot right here was 6. And so if I want to know the width, the distance between the two. So, box width is going to equal 6 minus 2, which equals 4 feet.